but we're laying a track that had to go out years. And so and it was not predetermined. And people think that Breaking Bad, they knew everything that was going to happen. I can tell you, things changed all the time on that show. Maybe not as much as other shows, but it was not completely figured out from the beginning to end. I mean, the arc was, we knew Walter White was going to die. We knew Walter White was going to go from being a good person to a bad person. But, knowing that, Vince added the genius of that story. And it was quite an accomplishment. But things did need to change.
This is the Courier 13 Podcast with Warner Andrews. My goal with this show is to present conversations among filmmakers that impart knowledge and inspiration to people who are currently making cinematic content, or for those who aspire to make movies and television but don't have the know-how yet to start, or for people who are just fascinated by the filmmaking process and the entertainment industry. My guest today is producer Stewart Lyons. All right. Hey, everybody. I know this isn't typical. I don't normally start the show out without the guest present, but I felt it was necessary that we introduce you, Daniella, because this is a really big announcement. The Courier 13 Podcast now has a co-host. It's no longer just the Courier 13 Podcast with Warner Andrews. Daniella, hi, what's up? How are you right now?
Hello, Tim. I'm good. So I'm really pumped to be here. This is like my first podcast, so I'm very excited to see how this turns out. I am a little bit nervous, I must say, just because I hear a lot about podcasts, but I don't, this is obviously my first time, so I'm trying to ease myself into it without repeating myself or stuttering my own words.
Well, I'll tell you this: that will happen. You will do that. So don't even worry. Don't even try to prevent that, because that's how conversation happens. Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on this show, honestly. And I think what you said is perfectly right. You're going to ease into this. This show, I kind of had to ease into this show. But hey, you get to come on a very big episode, like we were talking about earlier. So, which I'm really excited to get going on in a little bit. But Daniella, what do you want the people to know about you before we go on this journey, I guess?
Of course. So I am a senior at Columbia. I'm about to graduate in 2 weeks, so I'm really excited about that. Columbia College Chicago, for those of you who don't know, it's a big film school. It's so I study film. My major is cinema arts and sciences, but I do have a specific focus on directing and writing, and I have a minor in acting as well.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
You act?
Yes. So it's a little bit of I don't do it as much as I used to when I was little. But I do enjoy the art of acting in front of a camera, as well as much as I do working behind the camera and creating a story, of whether it's directing or writing. But yeah, I do act. I for now that acting thing is on pause because I'm focusing more on getting an entry-level job in the industry after I graduate. So maybe after I get a little bit of money, I will hopefully get enough money to pay for an acting coach, and then continue with that. But yeah, I did learn a lot from the classes of acting in Columbia College, because it's more of a, you kind of have to focus on what they give you in a script, and then there's so many ways to interpret a script as well. So that's that's why I do enjoy like acting. It's not just because I want to be like, I like to portray different characters
Mm,
that are different from me. And I'm interested in seeing how like a character's psychology as well.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I still I did not know that. I did not know. Well, because when we met, I said you strike me as the producer type. You strike me
Exactly.
as someone who produces stuff. So that's really cool. But I mean, I guess before we get into the interview, I do kind of want to ask you just one more question.
Of course.
Why did you agree to do this? Like, why were you interested in podcasting for, especially a film podcast like this? Like, why this? Why did you come on board, really?
I my friends from like the CELA program that I'm currently in, they always talk to us. They always talk to me about like there's so many different podcasts like that they do themselves, like or either like gaming or about film or about crime or whatever. They like listen to all those, and some of them they do like those podcasts too, like whether it's like gaming and all that stuff. So I was like, I've always wanted to be in a podcast. Like I love listening to people talk and like listening to people's different ideas and all that stuff. So when I heard that you had a podcast and you mentioned it when you were talking with Lawrence in one of our meetings, I was like, oh wow, like he has a podcast. Like that's so amazing. Like that's, and I would say that it's like someone I know, uh not like close, like we're not close, but we're like, but we know of each other. We're like acquaintances and all that stuff. So I was like, I've been telling my friends to invite me on their podcast just because I like talking about things that I know of. Like for one of them, he's like he does a podcast about Assassin's Creed and all that stuff. And I'm like,
Oh.
I'm a really big fan of Assassin's Creed, so I'm like, hey, like, why don't you invite me on? Like, I would love to talk about like any of the games that you have going on. And then he's like, oh, well, it's about to end, so we already like scheduled our guests for like the last episode. But yeah, so when I heard that you were doing a film podcast and all that stuff, and then you were talking to like Lawrence and all these other people, like you already talked to Bob as well when you mentioned it yesterday. I thought that it's just like that's so interesting, like why wouldn't I want to join a podcast where I get to hear different ideas, get to hear people's stories, and then like learn from them, or even like just talk to another person. I just love talking to people, so
Mhm.
that's why, yeah, it interests me. That's why it interested me into joining this podcast.
Yeah. No, I think if that's what you're looking to get out of this, then you're in luck. Cause
Yeah.
I mean, what we get to do here and like really get to dissect these people who we admire and learn from is just the biggest thing. And I know you're gonna get so much out of this.
Mhm.
And it's just a really beautiful thing, you know. Me, I mean, after I now, especially having you come on board, I really get to reflect on how this has grown and how it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And it really does make me stand in awe of it a little bit.
Yeah, like this is like, you know, it's, even if whenever we're like far into like, let's say when we're like 25 and then we're still doing this podcast, I feel like that's so interesting. Like we're still like you do want to work in the industry, right? Like in the future. You said you wanted to be a showrunner and all that stuff.
Yes, yes.
But I think that like, even continuing this in like the future, like you said that you don't have any intentions of stopping soon. So it's like, even like the people that we meet throughout our work, we can invite into the podcast and talk to them, just because it's just like interesting. I was hearing like I was listening actually yesterday to the Bob Titel or Title, sorry, I butchered his name, Bob Title podcast yesterday. And like just the way that like, the podcast carries on with like people, it's just so interesting to me. Like, like you ask them questions, they go on a tangent and tell you a story and all that stuff. And it's like, it's so interesting to hear like anyone's story, whether they're like a super advanced executive in the industry or whether it's someone like us. who's just starting out. And then it's like, it's interesting to hear their experiences and like how they overcame like their troubles or like their experiences on set or working with, people in the office, like whether they're PAs or a writer's assistant and all that stuff. I feel like that's so interesting.
Yeah, no, you get to learn so many different perspectives, and it just enriches your understanding of the industry, and you get to teach people at the same time. It's just win-win. I know Stewart is going to be coming in soon, and I just sent him the invite to come in. So I think we're going to stop the recording for a hot second, then we'll come back in when Stewart gets in here. But Daniela, thank you for hopping on this journey with me.
Yes.
I'm excited. I'm excited to go on this with you.
Me too. Thank you for inviting me and asking me to be co-host. Actually, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't think, I was like, I just wanted to be included in the podcast. But then when you asked me, like, are you still interested in being co-host? And I was like, oh, like, so he wants me to be co-host. And I'm like, yeah, like 100% I'll be co-host.
Yeah, you came into our meeting and you were like, oh, so I think, because you presented to me kind of with the notion that you were expecting to just kind of be like on the podcast and you would talk, which I think we should do that. We should just have a podcast where I just interview you. But I was also, when we were talking about being like the podcast, I was like, oh no, I think we could, we could partner up with this.
Of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you so much though. I really appreciate you thinking of me when it comes to including me in your podcast.
No, of course. Listen, I think, and we talked about this before we, kind of like agreed to it. We were kind of like, I was like, you seem like a nice person. So we seemed like it would work. There would be a chemistry and it would work. So I was down with it.
Thank you. Thank
you. Yeah. So I'm going to stop recording temporarily. And when we come back, we will have Stewart Lyons, the line producer of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, on the show. Very excited.
Great.
Okay, we're recording. Stewart Lyons, thank you so much for coming with us, coming to the podcast today, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah, no, seriously. Thank you so much. I know, and I do want to, just give a shout out to Daniella. She is our new co-host for the Courier 13 podcast, and this is her episode. And we're all just very excited that her first episode is with you. This is just such a really big deal.
Very kind.
No worries. I guess where I would just want to say off the bat, the reason that we actually are here right now is because of a man, Jose Soto, who is a DePaul professor in television writing and television producing at DePaul, and he connected us essentially and made this all possible. And really, your connection with DePaul and with other universities really comes from, and at least this is how I perceive it. You're very generous with your time with filmmakers and students of film and television. At least that's what it seems. It was what it seems to me.
I try to be.
I guess my question to kind of start off is, where does that come from? Is that just a part of just your like desire to just give back?
It comes from there. It comes from the fact that I genuinely enjoy the process of teaching. It comes from also my own experience in the industry, where I did not find that there were many people who did it, and we're all left groping in the dark for how to manage careers and how to enter the industry, how to maintain a life in the industry. All of those were things that I just did not find that there were a lot of people who could help me on my path through it. And I felt that there should be. And I felt that it was important for, teaching is a different process than working, and learning as a student is a different process than being employed as a film professional. And it required people with the knowledge to come to the class, to come to classes, and to just inform what were going to be the challenges up ahead, and making sure people understood the stakes that were involved with going into the industry, and could, basically match it and figure it out. Because again, I didn't find that there were too many people aiming flashlights in the darkness toward me.
So you're speaking from your own experience.
Oh yeah.
Coming through.
Getting into the industry, like compared to what we have right now. I go to Columbia College Chicago, and so did my boss Lawrence, and he said that he didn't really have like the semester in LA program, and the semester in LA program is like a program where they help students move to LA and incorporate them with industry professionals and all that stuff. So it's he even told me, like, and he graduated college in, like, I think 2010. I don't really remember, but he said that it was so different because he just kind of got his stuff and moved out here, which is also like, a really big thing for anyone that does that, like,
Sure.
especially when they don't even have a plan A or a plan B. They just kind of like grab their stuff and go.
Right.
So I think that's really interesting that, compared to what we have today, it's definitely a little bit easier with like the teachers that have already experienced all of this stuff. And there's teachers that want to pass their knowledge onto us, like kids our age, to like how to get incorporated in the industry. I think that's really huge.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this will be helpful. So.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and it's really what you see a difference now is I feel like there's more of, and I definitely don't want to like give any positives to the fact that COVID happened. Like, I don't want to say that COVID happening was a benefit or a good thing, because that just feels weird to say. But one of the positives that I can kind of derive from it is that people like you, Stewart, who have knowledge and are willing to give it and want to give it because they feel like they should, can do that so much easier. I mean, you can just zoom in like what we're doing right now. You can zoom into a classroom and give a lecture and give really practical information and advice on how to incorporate yourself into the industry. And you didn't have that before. Like, you'd have to fly out and give a lecture.
I like that though.
That is cool though. No, seeing people in person though, it is fun.
Yes, no, it is possible. I've now done a Zoom class with Jose, is in addition to the in-person I did a year ago, February, and there have been other classes that I've done, and you can do classes. I've done classes now in England and a few other places around the country, Florida, that I didn't have to travel to. But I'm looking forward to getting back to in-person class things. Technology is great. Zoom is terrific. But it's the difference between, let's use a metaphor that we all know, the difference between watching a movie in the theater and watching a movie on big screen television at home. Same visual, different emotional, different intellectual experience. And there's certainly something about that dynamic of the classroom that I'm sure everyone truly misses, albeit that the technology has managed to let's say stop the sinking, but we're looking forward to the boat moving forward again in person. So I've got my shots.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, yeah, and it's the difference is that capacity for human connection that you get in person that you don't have.
I think to some extent you've had access to professionals who were working full time, who were dead on the water for a while and could be accessible for classes as well. So maybe you gained some personalities there would not have been available otherwise. But
Yeah,
okay.
I'm fascinated. What was it from your perspective? I'm fascinated to know, what was it like for you
Yeah,
when everything initially shut down?
I am so fortunate that it's, again, nothing positive to say about COVID, but at the time that things uh, shut down, I was doing a tremendous amount of consulting. And as that started fading away, I was hired to write a screenplay. So I was fully engaged with that. And as that faded, as I finished the screenplay, I segued into producing a pilot in Albuquerque, which I finished at the end of February. So, man, don't look at me as somebody who had a bad time in COVID. My wife was miserable, but she had just retired and we had planned on traveling, and she just couldn't do anything that she really wanted to do. And she's very wonderfully social, and that went away. So I was really, and none of us got sick. So we were really very fortunate. But production did shut down completely. And when we resumed production in Albuquerque, the first thing that we had to do was set up a field hospital and then bring the show in to that kind of testing and environment. And the end part of the show, I was being tested every single day for COVID. The closer that you were working to actors who needed to be unmasked, the more testing you needed to go through. And so I'm part of that inner circle. And it was, as was the director and the cinematographer, makeup and hair, wardrobe, the sound person who puts on a mic. All of those people needed an extremely high degree of testing constantly. And there was no socializing aside from the actual work itself. And that's unusual on a pilot. Usually you're trying to not only work 14 hours a day, but you get together on the weekends. I mean, you're really trying to create a good culture for the show to move forward into, and that wasn't possible.
You said that, oh, sorry, Tim.
No, it's okay. We're figuring this out. We're figuring out this back and forth.
You know what? I think there's a subtle time difference that throws a lot of people's conversational rhythms off.
That is very true on Zoom. Yeah,
so
that's fair.
Please go. I just don't want to be accused of talking over anybody.
I feel the same way. I just don't want to interrupt anyone, especially like interrupt anyone if they have like a good idea or like a good question. But you said that you were for the show that you were currently on, that you were like that you had to be tested constantly. Were you like a line producer for that show, or were
Yes.
Okay. And then as a line producer, you have to be close with the actors, because I thought the line producer was more of like creating the movie but on a budget.
There's a huge overlap between the unit production manager responsibilities and the line producer responsibilities.
Okay.
And I had a terrific UPM, Joe Latito, working with me. What we decided was that he would be offset, I would be on set. Okay. We weren't going to switch, because he had a lot of contact with a worker level, a crew level that he was dealing with construction, he was dealing with transportation, he was meeting with the location people. I could stay away from that once the show started. Mm-hmm. Before the show started, I was part of the setup, and stay on set and deal with any on-set issues that were developing. And in order to do that, I'm talking to the director, I'm talking to the executive producer, who are also on set. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, I wound up directing 8 days of second unit, which is constantly going back and forth. So with actors. So it was not necessarily on other shows. As a line producer on a pilot, I am on the set a lot, but not exclusively. I would switch off with the UPM. This, we just divided and conquered, and it worked out great.
That's good. That's great. And then compared, was it like the same? I know you were on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Like, do you have, was it different line producing back then to what it is producing now, or was it mostly like the same thing, like the
It's
same?
it's, it's pretty much the same thing. You know, the COVID testing cadence is its own challenge,
Mhm.
and that's going to become less of a factor moving forward, but it will not completely vanish. Uh, but aside from that, realistically, not much has changed in the production of motion pictures since the advent of sound.
Okay.
Still done the same way. What's changed, of course, is the equipment.
Hmm.
And what's changed is a little bit of process. And when I started, there was no video village, for example. And that changed the way people approach the day on a set. Um, Not necessarily all positively, in my opinion, but it did change. You know, it is what it is. Um, but the process of making a movie, the process of making a pilot or a TV show, it's, you know, you have a script, you prepare you break down those elements, you get everything ready. That's huge. Uh, you work on a budget to support it, schedule to support the budget, and then it's bring the actors in, rehearse, send them away, light, bring them back in, rehearse, shoot, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Well, in a TV show, yeah, rinse, repeat for several.
Well, TV or movies, you know, not everybody's Clint Eastwood who does it either on the first or second take. And if he needs to go to a third take, somebody's really not doing their job and they will be replaced.
Yeah. Well,
On the other hand, you have David Fincher.
who does like 99 takes?
Whatever.
Could you work with someone like that? Like a director like that?
Mm-mm.
No.
Did you ever have difficult like people to work with, or
I've only had difficult people to work with. There are no simple people in show business. There are nicer people than others, and I've had some people who weren't very nice, but no, it's a very demanding job, and directing is very demanding. Acting, look, everything we do as producers or even a director is to make the actors look good and to tell the best possible story from the script.
Mhm.
And it's not about us. It's about the people on camera, and it's about the story that's coming from what the story is that you're working on. So if you can't accept that the spotlight should not be on you, then you should move into either acting or some other area of the business than producing or being in production, or really almost any part of the process without except for acting. It's about what's going on the screen.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that anybody has license to abuse anybody to get it there at all, but you know, the focus is not you. And let's switch to teaching. That's a really big mindset change for students, because as a student, the professor, in my opinion, should be working, you know, the focus should be on you, either a collective you or an individual you in the classroom. And it's about making you advance, either in knowledge or in process, whatever it is, it's about you. It's not that way when you're working. And some people have a hard time making that adjustment.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating and very true point. I mean, because you were talking when earlier in the conversation, you were talking about that there's an incredible difference from being in a classroom and learning something, and then going on your own production and doing your own project and then making it, which I think that mindset thing that you just described is a big part of that.
It's a big part. It's a big part.
What do you think, I mean, aside from like that, what do you think that a lot of people or a lot of like students who are graduating from film school and then are heading into the industry and going into production, what do you think are the big misconceptions that they have going into this?
Well, if anybody thinks it's going to be easy, it's not. And if anybody thinks that there are going to be kind of clear paths for your career, it's not. And if anybody thinks that the trajectory for a career is a steady slope upward, it's not. So I think that if you have, look, if you want to become an attorney, it's a straightforward process. You get into the best possible law school, you do the best possible job in the law school, you pass the bar, you work for a firm. It's pretty clear cut. Same thing for medicine and most professions. But the film industry, the film and television industry really predated the whole gig economy by almost 100 years. I mean, it's been a gig economy since the 20s and maybe even in the teens.
Yeah.
And I'm talking of the previous century.
Mm-hmm.
So
the 1910s, yes.
Yeah,
that one, yeah.
Yes, when we walk through snow to get to school, even in Southern California. But anyway, yes, it's a gig economy. So it has a different dynamic than people who go to work for Google or Amazon, or I was an executive at Netflix. It's very different than that. And it takes a mindset, it takes preparation, it takes resources to be able to, begin to get a career together. Not that my beginning in the previous century is comparable to what it is now, but I think I spent almost 2 years before I had any job that lasted more than 6 or 7 days.
Mm.
And because I was just filling in, trying to make associations and show people what I could do. And then after about 2 years, I noticed that the work started getting a little bit steadier, and I would go from a gig and maybe down a week or two, and then another gig. But it was 2 very, tough years. And I think that's maybe that hasn't changed that much. Although I do believe in my heart of hearts that the opportunities and access now are so far superior than what we had. I started in a universe of 100 TV series. There's now over 500, and that only counts the streaming and network and cable and basic cable world. It doesn't count the fact that there are many other access points that are not being counted like that. For example, YouTube. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity that you can get to be a part of that did not even exist prior to 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. When did you feel that, after those 2 years, I've heard so many people say the first 2 years when you move to LA, from so many different people, the first 2 years are the hardest when it comes to finding a job. But did you have a temp for hire job? Did you ever do anything like that? Because I currently am hired by a job agency, and it's a temp for hire kind of thing. And it's I guess my question is how do you get out of that 2-year rut, or when do you feel that you're starting getting out of that 2-year rut, when you only have work for 6 to 7 days as an assistant or as a PA and just filling in for jobs?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, I was, and excuse the implied sexism, but I was a Manpower girl guy. Manpower was a temporary secretarial thing when people had secretaries. And the one thing I could do was type pretty quickly. So it was that. But I also worked in department stores during Christmas time, folding sweaters and selling gloves and doing things like that. And I had the classic waiter waitress thing. I never got to, although I love food, so that wouldn't have been so bad. But those were the temp jobs that I did.
Okay.
And that kind of kept me going until the ball started accelerating. Eventually you work if you work with enough people, several things can happen. One is they want to work with you again, and they're more successful than you, so you kind of get pulled along. You become known for a certain area or expertise. I filled in on a job. I was based in New York. I filled in on a job in Washington, D.C. And then the next time there was a Washington, D.C. job, somebody said, well, who's worked here recently? And I had, and I got sent down again. Then that happened like 3 times. And then I became the Washington, D.C. expert. Okay. And all the shows that were going to Washington, D.C. were coming out of Los Angeles because they would just shoot in front of Lincoln Memorial, in front of Jefferson, Arlington Cemetery. They were wonderful experiences. And eventually one of the California groups said, please come on out. We would like to hire you as a key second on a show. And I went, okay. And at that point I was doing work for the Directors Guild, and although they didn't allow people to move, they allowed me to move. And now it's very different. And I moved out. They told me I could move out. I moved out of New York, left the keys to the apartment, and came out. And
you're just like, I'm out. There was I'm gone.
No, that's where the game was. Now, today, you could have a great career in New York City because they have the rebates and scores of shows are being done there. But that wasn't the case. There was literally a 6-month time, I remember, that no show, literally not a single TV show or movie was shot in New York City. And of course, that was the time I started my career. So that's
shocking to think.
Commercial, but nothing, zero, literally zero. I'm not exaggerating.
And when was that time? Like when no one was shooting films in New York?
That was in the 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I would guess it probably was about 75, 76.
Wow. And why was that? Why was no one shooting in New York?
It was a union jurisdiction issue where basically the Hollywood studios said, you guys work this out and we're not going to come in until you do.
That makes sense.
Look, there are things, this is ancient history, and it might be interesting to some people. I don't know how useful this is to a student now, but it's like people look at the digital transformation. How did it happen that film just suddenly went away? I mean, the digital had been around for a while. That was a union issue. The Screen Actors Guild said, we're not going to do certain things. And the producers organization, the AMPTP, said, okay, well, we'll consider everything on digital, and therefore we'll deal with AFTRA.
Okay.
And in 1 year, it went from 80%, 90% film to 90% digital. 1 year. And SAG had to merge with AFTRA. Again, I can go on to the history, but I'm not sure how.
I mean, I kind of find that fascinating. I mean, I'll be real with you.
Okay.
That just speaks to the power of the unions, like SAG, DGA.
Also speaks to the power of the producers, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It definitely does.
And when I say producers, I'm not talking about executive producers. I'm talking about the major studios and the major networks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Jerry Bruckheimer doing that, or Ryan doing that. That's these are the big organizations, the major studios that determine and that sign agreements. And I got to tell you, I am a union member for almost 50 years of the Directors Guild, and I'm a very pro-union person. So very much pro-union.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, so the problem was back then is that they didn't want to go into digital, or they wanted to stay with film? Well,
there are people who like digital and people who like film, and for a while it was just the people who liked film were able to do it. But once that gauntlet was thrown down, it was, you want to shoot your pilot, you have to do it with this equipment.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And, even now, there are some major directors who insist on film, and they are keeping the film process alive. But honestly, I've been part of tests where experienced filmmakers cannot tell the difference. And if you can't tell the difference and you're going to save $100,000 or $200,000 an episode on a television show, you tell me why you have to do it on film. And even if you could tell the difference, you can only tell the difference on a $50,000 monitor and not on somebody's Vizio with bad cable reception. So, I'll get grief from somebody who sees this, but honestly, if you can't tell the difference,
why?
There's no difference.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
was it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Like I'm just thinking, just like because no, Danielle, you go. I'll say my question for a little later. Danielle, you go.
Was it cheaper back then, or to shoot digital instead of shooting film, or because I know Tarantino is big on shooting in 35 millimeter and all that stuff. So was it more expensive back then, and is that why people wanted to switch and save what you said, if you want to make your pilot, you have to do it digital? Is that why? Or
that was part of the reason too. Digital has always been pretty much cheaper. It was a question of, can you get an equivalent result?
Okay.
Breaking Bad was the last show that I did that used film.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when we moved, and I also did the pilot and first season of Better Call Saul. Now, we wanted those shows to look the same.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematographer basically said, I can't make it look the same any longer because the film stock that you used is no longer being made. So it's going to change. If you would like it to change the least, I need to do it digitally and then work back to that look. I can't do it with film because I won't have the ability to change it. So that was pretty interesting, but it did save a lot of money as well.
Why do you think people have stopped making film, or that certain stock? Because I know in Columbia College they stopped doing film classes as well, for the cinematographers and all that stuff. They stopped doing the
Good
stuff. Yeah.
Good. So I taught at AFI a couple of classes,
okay.
And of course they said to me, listen, we're the American Film Institute, and so do not talk about digital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got on stage and I said, why are you guys still shooting with film? Because I'm not going to be told to not do something for students who need to know. I mean, you're not going to shoot film.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not. So studying film is okay. You might as well study to learn how to make a saddle for a horse. I mean, there are horses and they're going to need saddles, but I think you'd be better off studying how to do car interiors because there's going to be a much bigger market for that.
Yeah.
Do you think that that there's always with any transition in technology when it comes to in the film industry or just in general, are there always those people who are so resistant to change at all costs? And do you think that can kill a career if you're just that resistant to adapting?
Yes. Why would you? What are you holding on to?
And not that I agree with this, but I think for some it's nostalgia of what they were indoctrinated into.
Then play old music when you're at home by yourself.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just trying to speak.
Okay, look, If it yielded a demonstrably superior result, then it might be worth the extra cost.
Mhm.
But remember, I'm not making movies for me. I'm not making movies for my friends. I'm making movies and TV shows that either they're going to be watched by a couple of million people or they're going to flop.
Yeah.
So in the same way that the entire process is to make the actors look good, ultimately, if it's not being useful to get to the audience, what the hell are you doing it for?
Mhm.
And, you know, the truth is that if you can make a movie or a TV show for a certain price, and somebody comes along and says, I can make it for a lot less, but it'll still look as good. What will that mean? It might mean you have longer shooting time. It might mean that you can afford more extras. It might be that you can get a bigger, better location. It might be that you can do more special effects or visual effects in post. It might be that you can get a better piece of music to go on your show. Those things will make a difference. The difference between digital and film will not.
Mhm. Interesting.
So I'm about the person who's watching.
Well,
Yeah.
that's I think a key difference, and I think audience can tell that when they're watching a film, because or a TV show, because sometimes you watch stuff and it comes off as pretentious, I guess maybe is the right word to say, and sometimes, but what you bring up is such an important thing, like, and even in productions that I do, sometimes you have to remind yourself of that, and you have to remind the people that you're working with. It's like, especially when we're like have a big disagreement over how to do something, how to execute something. It's like, and as a director, I've been in that position where like I really want this, but then my producer, someone else is like, but we also really need this, and this really helps tell the story right, and this is how people are going to get it. So you have to let go of your preconceived notions a little bit of how this is going to go down. And you, as a line producer, know you do this with directors all the time.
All the time. And you don't do it on the fly. I mean, you don't, hopefully you're not figuring it out right on the set, although sometimes that's the place it becomes apparent. You're figuring it out during prep, and you're figuring out, I'm hired a lot to do scheduling and just pure scheduling on pilots and TV series and things like that. If I can save a day of a full-scale Hollywood show, I'm saving somewhere between $175,000 and $250,000. And that's just from scheduling efficiently. It's very hard to save that kind of money by making a slightly better deal on your grip equipment.
Yeah.
So I'm really about that kind of process, but you must always keep in the full, and I think you were talking about it, Warner, know what's important to your story, and don't give up the stuff that's critical to it, but understand that everything else can be somehow adjusted. And if you think creatively as a line producer, and there are a lot of people who just basically go, no, that's our budget, we can't afford it, you figure it out. And I'm not about that. I'm about helping the filmmaker make sure that they tell the same story beat first, or the same emotional beat, but maybe there's a better way of doing it. I'll give you an example. I was connected with a show that was set in the Middle East, and they had a secret agent or a Mossad agent who had hidden his weapons in a bus terminal. And he goes to the bus terminal, parks outside of it, goes through the whole bus terminal, gets the weapons, goes back, gets in his car, and drives off. Okay, 3/8 of a page. If your viewers don't know, in filmmaking, we divide pages into eighths, and you don't reduce the fractions. There's no 1/4 page. So it's 3/8 of a page. Maybe With all that walking, it would have taken 45, maybe 50 seconds. But here's the wrinkle. They weren't shooting in Israel. They were shooting in Jordan, which meant that you had to go to a bus terminal in Jordan, put up all Hebrew signs in the stores, change the license plates on any vehicles that we were seeing, hang an Israeli flag in a country that is, it's a little dicey you don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities. Yeah. Hire 150 extras because he has to walk through a busy bus terminal. You have to have a locker. Of course, the director's going to say, well, maybe we're behind and we see him reaching in. Oh, now you have to build that. He gets back in his car and drives off. I said, okay, that's a full day because then you have to move the company to another location. So it's a huge thing. I said, okay, we're out in the desert. Our Mossad agent is driving along. He stops in the middle of nowhere. We don't know what he's about. He takes out a GPS, walks up a hill with a shovel, digs a couple of things. We hear clunk. He opens up a locker, takes out the weapons, closes the door, gets in his car, drives away.
Yeah.
That was about $250,000.
All of that.
Wow. All of that. Same beat. Visually more interesting, I think. Avoided all the production problems. Mm-hmm. But if the writer and director had not gotten on board with that, we would have still had to go to the bus terminal. We wound up doing the desert scene.
That's good.
They liked it better.
Yeah.
So that's creative producing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, that's a perfect example to just display to everyone, like, the things that, like, I just feel like people who are not filmmakers or, who are really in the industry, they don't understand, like, what a creative producer does in that sense. Like, you are reshaping the story slightly so that it can actually be done.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a situation? Well, let me ask you this specifically, like, because you've worked with people like Vince Gilligan. You and Vince Gilligan, to take Breaking Bad, for example, you were on that show. You and him were like the first people on that show, connected to that show and brought it through the whole thing.
There were people who were involved with the development. Mark Johnson, Melissa Bernstein, who made very significant, and who were also on, but for a while, they were primarily in Los Angeles. I was the only one who was there in New Mexico for every day of production. Even Vince was not there for every day. He directed the pilot and he was there. Mm-hmm. But after that, he directed, 1 or 2 episodes a year. And with that exception, he was usually back in Los Angeles with the writing team, working on the scripts. That was Vince's, main responsibility was first off, he set the tone with a brilliant pilot, and it was our job to execute the writing.
Do you, with Vince, I'm just taking Vince for example, what was he, and I guess I'm kind of putting you in a corner here, but was he easy to work with and collaborate on that level of, like, line producer, showrunner kind of dynamic where it's like he's the creator of the show, he's like, establishing.
He was great. The key thing there is you have to come up with a better idea than the brightest guy in the room.
From your perspective, as the line producer, yeah,
he's the brightest guy in the room. And he also has the long range vision, because if you're doing a TV show that's each episode is kind of self-contained, that's one thing. But we're laying a track that had to go out years. And so and it was not predetermined. And people think that Breaking Bad, they knew everything that was going to happen. I can tell you, things changed all the time on that show. Maybe not as much as other shows, but it was not completely figured out from the beginning to end. The arc was, we knew Walter White was going to die. We knew Walter White was going to go from being a good person to a bad person. But knowing that, Vince added the genius of that story, and it was quite an accomplishment. But things did need to change quite frequently. I mean, look, New Mexico is a wonderful place to shoot. I would rather shoot there than literally anywhere else. But it's a demanding environment, and you have to respond to the weather. You have to respond to the conditions there, and things. It requires the better and more creative the producer, I find the more flexible they tend to be. Mm-hmm. And the kind of producer I'm talking about is a writer producer, which is a television phenomenon. In features, it's a slightly different game. You have a director who's got more of a central power position than a director in television. Yeah. And sometimes those folks tend to be a little more rigid than you would think, but the better ones are not. Most of the better ones are not. Some of the better ones are, but
yeah. And then you, as a line producer, do you ever take a look at the script just to see, to take a look at the budget, or is that do you ever have to talk to the script supervisor or anything like that? Considering
the script. Look, I feel the script is where everything starts. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I teach scheduling, I don't start with, okay, this is how you underline. I start with, read the script. Read it for pleasure. Read it to as a filmmaker, read it to visualize it. Because unless you have a big overview and you know what's important, you're not going to be able to schedule as well as somebody who does know that. Right. So don't get involved with the details. Enjoy it first. Well, that takes, for a script, that takes an hour. Then you start breaking it down, and for a typical pilot, that may take me 15 hours. But that first hour, I'm just trying to get a sense of what is the story that we're trying to tell here. And I'm sorry, did that answer the question? In talks, a script supervisor, well, we may be using the terms a little differently. Script supervisor, in my experience, is somebody who's keeping a watch on the takes and logging the takes. It's almost like being an editor moved forward into the show, and they're incredibly important people. And they do an extremely valuable job. Going back to the writing team and talking about, look, my job is to make what they write happen. Yeah. So that's my major effort. The example I gave in the before of the bus station versus middle of the desert, that came up because we were the studio that had okayed the budget, had figured it to be 100 days, because we're talking about 8 episodes. Mm-hmm. And we were around 130.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a much bigger problem of how do we bring this down? And, so that eliminated a full day. Yeah. Well, okay.
Well, yeah.
So there was some, hopefully, look, there's a thing where you say you can have it fast, you can have it good, or you can have it cheap, but you can't, and you can do only 2 of the 3. I actually don't believe that. I believe that holds if you're not willing to look at what you want to do and figure out maybe there's another way of doing it. So that's kind of, don't get stuck. And, just saying that something's cheaper, I find, is never a good selling point.
Yeah.
No.
Never a good selling point.
That's not, I don't think that's something that a director ever wants to hear. Mm-mm. Like just flat out, hey, we're not going to do this thing that you really were excited about because money, because that's gonna, do you think when you're trying to find solutions to problems, you're trying to create something and get it on screen in the best way possible for the production and for the creative integrity of the project. How do you consider like a negotiation process between you and the either director or the showrunner? Like, did you learn that on the job? Like, is that just learning how to deal with people's personalities and sensibilities?
It's just you're always trying to find the most effective path for dealing with people. And there are things that you can do and things that you can't do. And when I say that cheap, saying something's less expensive, that's not the way I would present it.
Okay.
I would present it in the way of, gosh, I'd really love to bring in this Technocrane here, but in order to do that, we would have to find what other resources can we shift around. When I was when I was first assistant director on TV series, I would say to the director, tell me the scene that you want to make a movie out of, and I'll tell you the compromises or the adjustments. I would sometimes say adjustments instead of compromise. I'll tell you the adjustments that we would need to make in the schedule so that you have some scene that if you clip it out and put it on your reel will get you your next job. So, if you put things in, if you frame things in the proper way, you will get a better result.
Yeah.
Or maybe you'll get the result that you want to get.
You kind of have to find like a solution to like the thing that you don't want to do, like the kind of like a compromise, kind of like what you said, or the adjustment.
Use adjustments that are compromise. Nobody thinks that compromise is a winning strategy. They think that that's a cop out and they've given up something. Shifting focus is shifting resources or allocating resources to the biggest problems that give you the best net result is probably, look, if you make something if you phrase it so that it is in someone else's interest,
right,
then you will typically get a better result.
What was the there's multiple questions that are flowing through my mind.
Just try one.
Oh yeah, I'll just throw one at you. I know that this is a very kind of big question, but whether it be on a television show like Breaking Bad or a film, what was a TV episode or moment or scene that really tested you as a line producer?
That's pretty easy. First off, it always feels like you're on a tightrope. You never really, there's kind of a feeling that you talk about sometimes with crew, is that the days that you fear the most go well, and the days that you think are going to go well and relax your vigilance on are the ones that bite you. Having said that, there are days where you're on a soundstage and the doors close and everything is there. And that's one thing. And then there are days where you're out and the weather is insane or crazy things are happening. I can say that producing the train robbery episode of Breaking Bad was as logistically complex as anything that
I can imagine.
It literally took us, and we had some great people working on it. It took us essentially 2 months to set up that episode with the train and all the logistics and where we did it. And it was, when we were shooting it, it was flat out. We had 3 units going and a first-time director who did a fantastic job. And Michelle McLaren, who was on 2nd unit, and I was doing some other work. It just was everybody going full bore. and it all came out great. We finished the show, and then I got a call from another series in New Mexico, and they said, we're supposed to shoot a train next week. How did you do the train episode? And I just said, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. It took us 2 months to set it up, and you're doing it next week. Good luck.
So they had to do it next week.
I don't know what happened.
Oh my goodness. So like
don't know what happened. So but look, they may have gotten the script only the couple of days before. That happens. So
right.
The thing about Vince and the writers is that Vince was savvy enough that when there was a huge challenge, he knew to give us more time to figure things out. And he respected us when we said, we need answers now, or we can't have it ready then. And, and that would happen frequently because directors in TV are only coming on for the episode. So they may not work, when we hear about a story, they may not work for another month or two. But if you have, say, a car that has to have machine gun hits all the time, and this is an actual example, Vince said, well, why don't you wait for the director to tell us where the machine guns bullets are going to hit? And I said, you want this car chewed apart. We need to know, we need to set 100 squibs right now. We do not have time to do that in the 7 days of prep that this director is going to have. So we started a month and a half early.
So you guys basically had to, and what season was, I'm only on season 1 of Breaking Bad so far. So like what season, and I've people have already spoiled, talking about it in class.
I told her that she needs to get on that.
So I've been catching up. But what season was the train robbery thing? And I
think that was season 4.
Season 4? Okay. How did you guys, when you read this?
Wait, the train robbery, wasn't that
5?
Season 5? Oh, yeah. 5.
Did you guys you guys get all the scripts for a season before
Nope.
No.
You don't? Okay. So you literally have to prepare, when it came to the train robbery scene, you got the script, and how did you prepare for that, because it took you 2 months to prepare for that, and then
Right.
it probably took you even longer to actually shoot it, right?
And just remember that during those 2 months, we are preparing and shooting other shows.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's the challenge. In a feature, you have the script, you know your beginning of process, you know your end of process. You don't shoot the script in order, of course.
Yeah.
But that's it. In television series, you may or may not have all the scripts. Typically, you do not. And in those situations, you not only have to prepare, but you have to shoot, and you have to wrap all simultaneously by the time you're on episode 3.
Yeah.
So you have to build an organization and a team that is capable of handling the problems that will inevitably arise without necessarily knowing what those problems are in advance. So I'll get a call, and this was an actual call. Vince said, we're going to need to have a head of a bad guy put on a tortoise.
You'll get to this, Danielle.
We'll get to this episode.
Right. Yeah.
I said, okay, do we know who the bad guy is? And the answer was, at that time, no. I said, well, if we're going to want a realistic head, let's figure out who that guy is. Okay. And he said, well, wait a second, there's another problem here. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, it has to be a tortoise that would live in northern Mexico, not New Mexico, northern Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, I'll find out. I found out that the tortoises that live in northern Mexico are all endangered. You
Right.
can't touch them.
Yeah.
However, I also found out very quickly that there is a feral population of African horned tortoises that live in New Mexico and in Mexico. I mean, these are pets that just got too big, or given that they're tortoises, outlived their owners,
Yeah.
and are just out there breeding and all over the place. And so I found that out, and they're also bigger than native tortoises. So that's how we did that. And then of course we had to figure out, how do you attach a head to a tortoise without putting a nail through the tortoise and hurting it. And the thing is, you attach it the same way you attach a toilet to a floor, with a silicone seal, and stick the head on. So, but that's just a challenge. I mean, I didn't begin the season thinking I was going to run into that. I got a call on a Sunday and it was going to work in 2 weeks. Okay. And that's actually something I talk to students about, which is, you don't have to know the answer to the question. You have to know how to begin the process of answering the question. You can't just go to the mountaintop. You have to figure out how you're going to go to Everest through the base camp, and then each climb and become acclimated. You have to know the process of finding answers, not the absolute answers, because who the heck went to film school to learn about a tortoise with a head on it? Nobody. But you have to know, what do you do in those situations? Well, first thing I know is I'm going to need to get a head made. And to get the head made, I'm going to need to say, you need to cast this person, because we need to know, we need to, make the casts of the cast. And then you have to look up things and figure things out, and go to places and work your way through all those answers of finding out, okay, what tortoises are native to Mexico? What tortoises aren't endangered? None. What are we going to do here? Well, I'll call up a tortoise expert. What would you do? Okay. Found out about feral tortoise populations. I mean, I know a lot of trivia, but that wasn't one of them. So anyway, that's kind of a fun story, I think.
Yeah, like I guess I'll get to it later in the seasons, but so it was like you literally just attach the head to the shell of the tortoise.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
I don't want to spoil a show for myself.
Oh yeah. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of other big things that'll surprise you. That's not even.
And you don't know the character who gets killed, so.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
By the way, just parent, he's somebody who tends to get killed a lot in the world of movies.
He's a recognizable actor.
He's a recognizable actor. He keeps borrowing the head.
No way, really?
Yeah. Yes, he keeps borrowing the head.
That's hilarious.
It's not Sean Bean, is it? The
Good guess, but no.
Yeah. He dies in a lot of movies and TV shows, so like Game of Thrones, and then
Nope.
which other movies he's been into, he dies in a lot of those.
Nope.
Okay. I have to think. Okay. That's really interesting though.
I don't think we should tell you. No.
I'm not going to, no, please don't.
No.
Okay.
Well, that just makes me appreciate those moments, even though they're like scenes and like mini sequences that are memorable. The reason that they're memorable is because you put so much research and effort into making those small moments happen, and then you sell that moment sells so well because of the amount of time the amount of thought from a producing standpoint to put that together.
And then it also comes from the writers. I mean,
of course, yeah.
I mean, to think of that moment of, we want to put a head on a tortoise, that's just pure genius. Figuring out how to do that, is my contribution to it, but the idea of doing it is theirs, and that's where a lot of credit should go. Vince and those writers were just pure magic.
I feel like for a scene where it comes to like a head on a tortoise, it would have to be a character that had a big impact throughout the whole season, right? Or did you just hire this actor for that specific scene for like one episode?
You're going to have to watch the episode, Daniel.
Yeah, I think any more would just be giving.
You're going to have to watch the episode.
Yeah, but I'm just curious as to like, I feel like someone would like such a strange scene that like they would have to be hired for like more than one episode.
You're going to have to watch it.
Okay, I will. I'll watch it. What season is this? Is it season 1 or?
I think
don't
it
remember.
probably was 2.
Okay.
It could no, wait a second. Yeah, I think it was 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's 2, then I'll wait. If it was like 5, along with the tortoise on a head and then a train scene.
Train scene 5.
Okay. I'm excited.
Did you? Honestly, I just want to make this remark. This is so cool talking Breaking Bad with someone who was like so influential in making Breaking Bad. This is just really cool. Like, did you know from the get-go that the series was going to be great?
No.
Okay.
No, did not. I knew that there were some there were things that I had not seen before.
Right.
There were phrases and sensibility, but look, even at the time when we finished the pilot and before it went on the air, or even before we knew that we were going to be doing the series, people would say to me, well, what do you think? I said, we got a 50-year-old guy who's dealing with a horrible drug in a very industrial down community, or at least the presentation of it. And there is no eye candy. This is not Miami Vice where the drugs are sexy and the girls are sexy and the guys are sexy. This is real kind of a downer. He's going to die. Who wants to watch that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
And the answer really was that for 2 seasons, although we got incredibly great critical response, the audience was not overwhelming. And it came down very close to the show not continuing after the 2nd season. And then Netflix stepped in and picked up the episodes, and it exploded. It exploded. We got the 3rd season, and the 3rd season, we started picking up more and more audience because people, for the first time in history, could go back and start a show and catch up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for the
That's
first time
huge.
history,
That's huge.
It was huge. Nobody could binge before. You couldn't binge on HBO. You either watched it or you didn't, or you recorded it and you didn't. But binging was new, and people were just blown away by this storytelling. So as we entered into season 4, we knew we were in a different world. And then, for us on season 5, when essentially everybody knew we were racing toward the climax, it really felt like we were part of a cultural phenomenon. And that was exciting. That was a lot of fun.
So were you on a network before Netflix stepped in? Weren't you on Showtime?
AMC.
That's what it was, AMC. So then AMC and Netflix like kind of made a deal together to continue the show, or did Netflix?
Actually, AMC, I don't know, AMC is involved. Sony was actually the production company that did Breaking Bad, and it was licensed by AMC, and maybe, I don't know what their approval process was to get it on Netflix, but they may not have had a veto situation. But it worked out for them because once it went on Netflix, everybody could not wait for it to come on to AMC. And you could only binge season 1 and season 2. And after that, you were watching the cable in real time, or there were people who joined us in season 5 and, spent 3 weekends or 2 weekends or just 1 weekend catching up without any sleep, because that's how addictive that show was.
Yeah.
That's how I did it.
Yeah.
That's what happened to me. I'll just speak
But
honestly from the
Danielle
heart.
seems to be immune because she's only watched one season. So
I just started it over quarantine, so but I was also busy working on my projects, so it's kind of I have to
excuses.
Excuses.
You're just, you're in the doghouse. Just, that's it.
But yeah, like all my cousins in Mexico, they all watched the show and they were like, "Oh my God, like you have to watch this show." And it was before, before my mom even got Netflix and all that stuff. So they watched it like through AMC, and they were just saying like the show is so good and it's like it's amazing. Like it's just the way that they made it. It makes it epic. Like you have this character who is old. It's not like, not Miami Vice sexy or anything like that, but he has, I think what makes Walter White interesting is that he goes from being into like a good character into a bad one. And then that's what makes it interesting. He kind of like goes from inaction to action after he discovers crystal meth and all these drugs. And it's like, and it's not even like bad crystal meth where it's like mixed with something else. It's like pure crystal meth. And I'm not saying that like, ooh,
we're not advocating for meth on the show.
We're not advocating for meth. We're just saying like we have a character who is so interesting, who was a chemistry teacher in high school that uses his knowledge of chemistry to make pure crystal meth.
You're selling the show to the person who produced it.
Yeah, you're telling the producer to basically be like, this is really good show. You should.
This is really good show. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I should watch it sometime.
You should. You really should.
Actually, I tell you, the writing was so good. I'm actually waiting for another year or two to go by, and then I think I'll start it again because there were layers and textures and little Easter eggs that were all over the place, and it'll be fun to go back and see it.
What is? Oh, sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
No, it's cool. I don't want to belabor this, but I do just want to make a point just on the quality of writing.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm doing because I am my trajectory is show running as well, and I'm taking this class with Jose Soto, the writer's room. And I had the opportunity. I was able to pitch a show, and I assembled kind of like a mini writer's room to like map out and outline episodes. And it's this it's a really cool show about basically I wanted to make a character, like Jack Kevorkian, the euthanasia doctor.
Sure.
Basically, I wanted to make a show about someone who is so not that, who would never lean to that sort of direction, and then through circumstances, through his own demons, gets to that place.
Okay.
But we were sort of creating outlines for the episodes, and we were talking about like through lines of the characters, and because it's essentially a story about a man who is trying to slowly enter into this world of killing people who he believes that he's doing them a service. He's not like a psychopath per se, but he's helping patients to go to the other side who are suffering from illness, pain, loss, whatever. But he has to conceal that. He has to sort of gain the capabilities to hide what he's doing and hide it from the authorities, his family, whoever may be. And I realized, me and Jose we were talking, and I was like, okay, we need to change a couple of things because this sounds too much like Breaking Bad. Like just this guy who's doing these things and trying to cover up. And I just in that moment we changed some of the things, but I just realized just how fundamental of a story Breaking Bad is, because even now in writers' rooms, I would assume, especially if you're dealing with a serialized drama, because that story is so foundational and it's inspired so many people, our minds, either consciously or subconsciously in the writer's room, might go to avenues and storylines that feel like that because it's so, and we might even realize it because it's that compelling.
Yeah.
That kind of a character is that compelling.
That happens a lot. I mean, look, you come up. I wouldn't worry about it that much. They constantly kind of hearing writers, oh, there's so many basic plots, or there's so many this, there's so many that. The number's 12, the number's 21, the number's whatever.
Right.
It's how you treat those plots that make it important. Your character, is not going to be a chemistry teacher. Your character is not going to be likely in Albuquerque.
No.
Your character is not likely to be poor. Your character is not likely to have a special needs child. So you start, or an in-law who's with the DEA, you start eliminating all of those things. And if you believe in your story of how a doctor who's only previously been concerned with healing and helping people realizes that sometimes the way to help them is to unheal them.
Right.
And that is basically an elevator pitch right there, Werner. So if you were in an elevator and somebody said, well, what are you working on? If you repeat those two sentences that I just gave you, you could get somebody intrigued within a couple of floors. And that's important. You have to be able to distill your idea down to an elevator pitch so that if you are given the opportunity that, oh, Mr. Spielberg, nice to meet you. By the way, here's what I'd like to do. If he doesn't say, shut up, you're in, or at least you can present your idea. But it also helps if you are that clear on your concept, the writing will revolve around that spine, and that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Then I don't think you should have to really worry about that kind of problem. Look, Hollywood remakes movies all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And sometimes, all they'll do is they'll go from a male protagonist to a female protagonist, or, John Wick, it's basically the same movie. Okay, they killed his dog, they stole his car, and now we can kill all the people in the world. And Liam Neeson seems to have a family that keeps getting kidnapped. And then he destroys the bad guys. So I would not be so concerned with that. You're not likely to come up with anything other than the fact that you've identified a good character change and go with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be afraid of it. If you start copying episodes, then
yes.
that's harder to do.
It's actually, it's harder to be a copycat than to just be original.
Well, to be great original is the hardest thing in the world.
Right.
But
sure.
think of it as a game of chess, or think of it as I was just, what was it? I was just listening to an award show where the person who won the music said, I have 12 notes, the same notes that they gave to Bach. Same notes. It's what I do with them.
Mm-hmm.
Chess, it's what I do with the moves. They've been playing chess for hundreds of years. You can actually, and those, chess masters actually remember those games. But it's what you do with the moves. That's what differentiates things. But everybody plays the same 12 notes, and everybody plays chess with the same rules. But there's some people who are really great at it. So don't worry if you're playing chess.
Thank you. I mean, that really means a lot. That's amazing advice. And I think sometimes sometimes as a writer, I think you have to remember, and this is exactly kind of what you're saying, you have to kind of have to get over yourself and your perception of your originality a little bit.
Well, at one point, I believe in the 1930s, which was before I was even alive, you had a couple of really great writers. So you had Hemingway, you had Fitzgerald, and I don't know if Faulkner was in there too, but you had them and they had the same editor, the same person they were submitting their writing to, a guy named, I think his last name was Perkins. And his advice, and it gets repeated, was first you must kill your darlings. Anything you're, truly attached to, just why are you attached to it? Make sure that it's not about you. Make sure it's in service of your movie. And if it's not, kill it. Get it out of there so you can do the spine of the piece that you want to do. Look, I think that when it comes to copying things, people who are less creative tend to copy the settings. Okay, we're going to begin on a planet far, far away, and he doesn't know who his dad is. You're in trouble. You're in trouble if that's the beginning.
Yeah.
But, creating a different kind of, when Lucas set out to do this thing, nobody had ever done anything like it.
No.
So
if you think about it, a lot of the stories in Hollywood do have that that same, topic. Either like whoever is born doesn't know who their dad is, and it happens to be like Blacklist, like the daughter, she didn't know that James Spader, that's his name, right? The guy.
Well, that's the actor, yeah.
Yeah, that's the actor. Yeah. She didn't know that he was the dad, but he somehow
ruined the whole show for me, Daniela.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were watching it. Are you watching it?
Not at all.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. But it's like the same, it's the same trope of having the kids not knowing who their parent is, or they think that they have like the idea, oh, okay, these are my real parents, but in reality, there's a total backstory, like, oh no, you were just adopted. It's the same. There's so many tropes like that too.
Or in the cop movies where it's 2 weeks before retirement. Oh well, okay.
Yeah.
you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Well, it's like what we're hitting on is that there are, a less creative writer might copy settings and might copy specific things pertaining to other stories.
Exactly.
I think a great or a better writer identifies the themes within great works and applies to the character arcs and the character formulations themselves.
Right.
Like with the whole dad thing, with all like not knowing where your parents, that's like an identity thing. And people can relate to that. And that's why that's used so often in stories, like not knowing who you are in that sense.
We were talking about some older series, and it's amazing how often mom is dead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why is mom dead rather than dad dead? Well, because there was a cultural assumption that the father wouldn't really know how to take care of the kids as well. So if mom is there, it's just a financial issue. And if if mom is dead and dad has to take care of it, now you have Kramer versus Kramer, and for some reason he can't make French toast. Okay. That's just the way. I shouldn't have knocked that movie. There were some really great elements to it, though I'm not sure it aged as well as some other movies of the time. And that's the reason you do it, is if there are no problems, there's no movie. Yeah. So what's going to give you the biggest set of problems? And that's generally, that's the start of your movie. Mm-hmm. So that's why things are unstable, have to be unstable, because otherwise there's no movement. Mm-hmm. And so you set up things to create the instability.
Yep.
You're a writer yourself.
Yes.
I mean, like you so you understand this perfectly well. What is your um, philosophy on writing and developing characters? I guess like I know. This is like I just asked you like the broadest question that, and I know every writer's
Well,
different.
here's the thing. That's like saying it's a great question, Werner. I don't know we have time to really address it fully or adequately, but I think it goes back to what makes a story. And a story for me is not the initial concept. The story for me is you take the initial concept and then something strange, wonderful, something that you didn't anticipate happens. That's the difference between a first act and the difference at the transition to second act. That is the most important thing to get to when I'm trying to figure out, can I write a movie about this? Is to get a set of characters who I'm interested in telling a story about, and then what is where the story starts heading, and then makes a left turn or a right turn, whatever turn you want, but it makes a turn. And then I'm often, I would say often running, but boy, it takes a long time. It takes a long time.
It's grueling.
It is.
It is. It's not.
It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline. You have to put your tush in a chair and work it out. But having said that, please, anybody who's trying to write, don't start with the script. Start with an outline.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, if Vince Gilligan has to start with an outline, and he's a genius, don't you think you can write a script? Because if you do try that, I will tell you 100% of the time, you will get to the middle of your second act and go, gee, this isn't working. I better start again. And you will do that process endlessly until you're old.
I've made that mistake.
There are some mistakes people don't have to make. I could show you pictures of episodes of Breaking Bad. Every scene was written on a 4x6 card, and they were laid across and they were put on a board, and they would come up with scenes, and then they would shift things around, and then they would lock it in, and then somebody would write an outline from the cards, which is the way I like to work personally as well. And then from the outline, they would do a script. And that would be the process. And that process is really how most screenwriters and television writers and writers' rooms work, is some variation on let's get the cards on a wall. And now they do it virtually, but that's how it's done. And so then you can work out your act beats, because this, for me, I do it vertically. This is my first act, and here's the change. And now I do the second act, and now I'm going to need another change to midpoint of the second act. And then I'm going to do, at the end of the second act, all is lost. And then you go into your third act of how the hero, male, female, young, old, it doesn't matter, becomes victorious or becomes reconciled to what the issue is. And that's storytelling. I'm not saying you can't do it in a different way, but you're reinventing the wheel if you try and do that.
Yeah.
It's very hard to reinvent
It's hard.
the wheel. It's very hard because you're messing with, because story arcs and how stories are structured, that's so fundamental to the human psyche. Because
I couldn't agree with you more. And basically the rules, the realizations of that are actually thousands of years old. And you can everything from various holy books to you know. Certainly Greek drama recognized those rules, and they seem to hold pretty well.
People still respond to them, so.
Well, it's because it's essentially mimics the human condition. You have childhood, you have adulthood, and then you have old age. It's a 3-act structure to your life.
Wow.
Now, do you do the same thing? Sorry, Tim.
No.
Werner was just contemplating his death.
I was just thinking about how I'm gonna die one day.
Oh man, I'm gonna.
I'm dying. This is the first time I've ever actually thought about this now.
That's because you're young people.
I'm joking.
We don't generally tell people that until they're in their late 40s. But I'm not going to spoil the end of Breaking Bad, but I will ruin your life.
Oh,
Damn. No.
man. Wow.
What I'm saying.
I'm wrecked. I'm so wrecked right now.
That's it.
Great. But do you, when it comes to creating a character, do you have do you have character psychology? Do you integrate yourself into, when you're writing a character, into thinking the way that the character is going to think for this certain script that you have written out?
Well, I think you have to. I think everybody has to do that.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I don't think I couldn't. I don't think I could write a character who is not some aspect of me. And by the way, there was a moment in the pilot of Breaking Bad where, I mean, again, I'm a writer. I've sold a few things. Some things have gotten made. I'm not comparing myself to Vince Gilligan.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment where Jesse jumps up on a rock in the pilot, first episode. They're about to brew crystal meth, and Walter said, "Is there anybody around?" And Jesse jumps on this rock. He looks off. He says, "Nah, it's just a bunch of cows in a cow house." And he jumps down. And I went over to Vince right after we shot that scene, and I said, "I do not know how you can write a character who's forgotten the word barn. I don't know how that happens."
Yeah.
And I still don't. I mean, so you ask, did I know that it was something special? Yes. That moment to me was like, I could write for 100 years, and it would never occur to me that somebody would be so addled that they would forget that cows live in a barn.
Yeah.
That takes a level of detail.
That just takes a level of brilliance. And it was so simple. I mean, maybe somebody else would have overlooked it or not remarked on it. But to me, that was like, oh boy, we are really in some kind of different level of work here.
Yeah. That's impressive. That's brilliant, because, I mean, it's a student, it's his student that went to high school and all that stuff, but never did he, he doesn't, after he graduated or something like that, you would think that he, in high school, you would think that he knew what a barn is. They call it a cow house.
You would think, yeah.
I was like,
You've got a 6-year-old niece here who knows that cows live in a barn.
of course. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely brilliant.
Yeah.
When writers really pay attention to, either the integrity of a character or the intelligence of a character, or even Jesse, in Jesse's case, the stupidity or the lack thereof
of knowledge. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Given his position. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing.
It is.
I love when writers really pay attention to that type of detail.
Well, this is, we're talking about some of the best. So there you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe that these words are going to come out of my mouth, but okay. I think I'm going to have to wrap. We're going to have to wrap up this. I've been really enjoying this personally. And but I do, before we wrap, I do really want to ask you kind of like, and Danielle, if you have a final question, of course, throw it in. I would just like to ask you, Stewart, for people like us, me and Daniela, who are really about to head into the industry, what do you think is the best piece of advice that you could give to someone in our position right now?
Well, just remember you're starting out. So you're not being hired to, run a show. You're hired to be part of a team and to understand that you're there not to solve your problem. You're there to solve the movie's problem, the team's problem, your director's problem. And to realize, and this circles back to the beginning, the spotlight is not on you.
Mm-hmm.
You are there to help shine the spotlight and to keep that perspective going. And that's a different perspective than being a student. And it's a different perspective than being a child or a kid growing up, where the parents should be focused on your welfare. Right now, you will walk into a situation where you are either going to be providing solutions to somebody else, but it's the more you can keep that perspective, the better. And aside from that, show up on time, show up before time, show up ready to work, and just understand this is not a user-friendly business. It's not a life balance business. If you want to have a balanced life, this is not the place to, production is not the place to do it. There are places within the industry where you can have a balanced life, but production is not one of them. So just understand it's really, really hard, and it doesn't get any easier even as you advance your way up. But if you find satisfaction in it, and I have found a great deal of satisfaction in doing it, then you orient yourself to it, and you understand what it's going to take. With a lot of work and a lot of luck, it works out. And sometimes the work leads to the luck, and sometimes the luck leads to the work, but you have to be both. Mm-hmm. And you have to keep banging your head against the door. Unfortunately, that's the metaphor, until the door finally opens for you. And the problem is you don't know whether you have to bang it 5 times or 7 times or 20 times. Mm-hmm. So, it's always the last one that's successful. But if you want to keep in the game, you have to do it. That's the hard part, is knowing when you're just banging your head against the door and it's never going to open, and you need a different door, versus it's going to just take some persistence and it'll work out. That nobody can crystal ball you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
That I think that's an amazing piece of advice to leave off. I want to thank both of you. Stewart, I really want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and really just give us some great perspective and knowledge. And I had a lot of fun, just a good time. And Daniela, I just want to say, amazing job. First episode. Really good.
Now she has to go watch the whole series.
And now you have to watch all of Breaking Bad. And I would recommend Better Call Saul as well. Both really amazing shows. I mean, I have nothing else to say other than thank you. Thank you, Stewart.
My pleasure. Nice meeting you both.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
See you later.